Welcome back to Fueled by Coffee podcast. My name is Matt. I am your host, and today we are coming back for another Season 4 episode, this time with my good old friend and co-host, Aaron. Aaron, welcome back. We are stoked.
Thanks for having me, man. I think I'm wearing the same clothes as the last time we recorded.
Yeah, people can definitely see that with their ears. That's the ongoing joke of this season, is that Tommy started, actually our other co-host, he started this whole joke, this running joke of like, yeah, if people can see it with their ear, if the listeners can see it, you know. But yeah, no, lots of fun. If you didn't hear Aaron's other episode this season, he actually helped me kick off the season. We talked about big life changes, so go check that one out. It's phenomenal.
You can also find out what I was wearing.
Yeah. Oh man. But recap, I mean, we're late in the season now. We've had a Wawa tribute. As I said, big life changes. We've talked about wrestling. We've talked about music. We've talked about a whole host of things. So definitely something for everyone. The strange, the supernatural. Man, it's been a fun season for sure. But today we're going to talk about something that Aaron and I both love, which is traveling and vacations and that sort of thing. As always, check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Give us a follow here on SoundCloud. Send us a DM. Leave some comments. We love talking with everyone. We love the interaction and the engagement. We do this. I do this because I love it, and I hope you enjoy it. But as always, this is a podcast centered around coffee. And I'm back on my favorite, the Peets John. Peets coffee, the Major Dickason blend. It is my favorite coffee. One of my favorite coffees I've ever had. It's got such a good flavor to it. Mixes really well with my hazelnut creamer that I like. So Peets, shout out, please sponsor me. And also, I'm once again drinking it out of my Wawa mug because it's not like we're doing a twofer today with recording. So Wawa, please sponsor me as well.
I just want to point out that we had this discussion off air about describing coffee. Mm-hmm. So my current coffee that I've been drinking is Maxwell House original blend, very, very standard. I'm not a really creamer guy, definitely a black coffee guy, and it tastes good.
It tastes good. Oh man, Pete's gonna crucify you for that one.
And actually, that was a lie. It tastes, it's coffee.
It's okay. It's not good. It's okay. But yeah, so definitely check us out on social media if you like what you hear. Go sign up for our email newsletter. We're doing a exclusive merch through there, podcast updates, behind the scenes stuff. So lots of great stuff in there. Also, Tommy's tips.
Yep.
Tommy gives a life tip every month. But with that being said, let's jump right in. Traveling. You and I have both been on various vacations. We've been on trips with our significant others. We've been on trips. You've gone for school stuff, and then growing up, I know we went on trips as a family.
Same.
As you know, it's by looking at our outline, it looks like you did too. So we should have some parallels here, and maybe some contrasting points to learn from. But
yeah.
The first point that I want to touch on is like the importance of traveling, and I've touched on it briefly. The episode I did with Mike, the Team BMW Farewell. Mike just did a whole year's worth of traveling, like through Europe, and he's moved across the country to Chicago. He's always been big into traveling, and it's something that growing up I did, but it was more like a family thing. And then once I became an adult, I started going on trips once I realized like I have the money to, I have, the time I can take away from work. But I never really thought about how important it is until like pre-COVID, like after my long-term relationship ended and I didn't really have anything on my slate for the foreseeable future. I did a lot of traveling. I went to Philly, on multiple day trips, which I know like Philly's about like an hour and a half, 2 hours from where we live. I went to Vermont by myself. I stayed in a tiny house and wrote music. It was on top of a mountain, no cell service. It was an awesome experience. I'll probably bring it up at some point on this episode. But and then I went to Colorado last summer on a vacation with my lovely fiance, Kayla. But yeah, so I think for me, like traveling is such an important thing, and I realized how important I've realized in the last couple of years how important it is for me, because it really helped me to grow. That time period, I spent a lot of time and I'm not trying to harp on the past, but I feel like a lot of my young adulthood, I was very stagnant. I didn't really go many places outside of my comfort zone, as we've talked about.
Clarify what age range your young adulthood is.
Well,
falling
you know, from like the time I was like 18 to like 21, like that, for those first few years, you know, I was in a relationship that was not very beneficial to me at the time and like where I was at. And, you know, I didn't take a lot of chances. I didn't, you know, get out of my comfort zone and say like, screw it, John or Jack or Aaron, like, let's go to Philly next week, or let's go do this, or, oh man, I'm going to go to Vermont. And like, I didn't really do those like spontaneous travels and trips. And I think traveling to me in that pre-COVID period of like, you know, I got dumped the summer before COVID. And so like from there, like I said, I just started traveling. I had the time, I had the freedom. And I think, you know, through going to Philly, going to Vermont, spending that time alone or with friends or out in the world, it really helped me grow, because I feel like it opened my mind in multiple different ways, you know, different ideas or new ideas, and in cultures, whether it's like an idea is in like, you know, a cultural thing, like, hey, people see this a different way, or even if it's an idea of like, oh wow, I can do this like that, you know.
Yeah.
It definitely helped to open my mind up, me to be more open-minded, for lack of a better term, not to sound redundant, but to be more open-minded to other people, to other people's ideas and things like that. And also it helped open my mind creatively. Like instead of being locked inside this box of just like, go to work, come home, sit in my bedroom, make music, it was like, I have these experiences to draw from now, you know, thinking about being on the mountain in Vermont, thinking about being in the city for a day, and the things I saw and the things I experienced, you know. So it really helped me grow and also get out of my comfort zone, you know, being in a place that you're not familiar with, being in a place where, you know, I kind of had to learn or try to fit in. And I think another big factor of me feeling like traveling is so important is because it provides a decompression from everyday life. We all go through the grind of work and, you know, I don't know, just the craziness of everyday life, trying to plan everything and make time for everyone. And I think traveling is such a good way of taking a step back. And
it's funny because it has the aspect of the sitting down and planning and all the stress beforehand.
Yeah.
And then once it's all set, that's when you can kick back and that's just coast.
Yeah, and I actually had a point, like, traveling is mainly, I would say for the most part, focused on like that fun aspect, but it is stressful, like even making your flight if you're flying, or driving, you know, planning like, okay, how long is it going to take? How many times am I going to stop? You know, and then those unplanned things.
It's almost work to get that.
But once you're there, that's like, you know, the big part. Like I know when I went to Vermont in 2019 and I stayed in that tiny house, you know, it was like I was fresh off the heels of a breakup. I was really like on the mend mentally, and it was like it really helped me to step back and regroup, you know, and kind of like recollect my thoughts. And I feel like that was a big moment where I was like, you know what, like, I'm cool with being on my own. Like, I feel really comfortable right now. I feel good about life. So it's a really good opportunity. I think traveling for me is like, it helps me to decompress, helps me to kind of forget about work for half a week, however long I'm going to be gone. And then it just helps me to grow, being uncomfortable, going out of my comfort zone, you know. I've come to value traveling so much in the last few years, and it's something that I hope to keep doing as life goes on, you know.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I think it definitely helps you grow. Traveling for me has been a couple different things. It's been gaining independence. It's been growing as a person and figuring things out on your own. And it's also been that ultimate relaxation and like my ultimate why. A lot of people say, why do you do things? Like, what's it all for? Yeah. My ultimate why is just being able to spend time with my family and friends. And a lot of the trips that I've taken have given me so many memories. And, it's just that, like you said, that relaxation. It's mostly not necessarily for growing, just to enjoy the time that you have with the people that you love. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you talked about that last season when you were talking about like how you're big on experiences, like making the memory, you know, and traveling is one of the ways you can do that.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's jump into the meat of the episode. So now we've gone through the importance of traveling then as opposed to now, then being growing up, your childhood, your teen years, now being an adult, being independent, being able to just do it.
Like we touch on in most of our episodes, things change as we go through time and become different, and it's no different in this aspect of traveling as a kid with your family. Then you grow up and you're traveling on your own, or you're traveling with friends, and then eventually maybe you travel with your own family.
Yeah.
As far as you being the leader of the family instead of the kid.
Yeah.
You know?
I think growing up, not that like there are some families who went on like huge trips to like Disneyland and all. I never did that as a kid. A lot of my trips were based around going to the beach like once a summer or twice a summer, which I'm not saying by any, I know my mom's probably listening to this and she's going to say to me the next time I see her or talk to her, like, I'm sorry we didn't go to Disneyland. She always, and I'm like, Mom, no, that's not why I said it. No, but like, a lot of our trips were like to the beach because it's close, it's convenient, it's easy. Or like a lot of it was going south. I've had family that lived in like North Carolina and Georgia, whether that was my sister and her husband when he was in the Army, or like my cousins who lived in North Carolina, who my cousin Dave was in the Army, so like things like that. A lot of our trips were down south, and those drives are brutal, man. Being a kid, oh my God, 9 hours in the car and listening to my dad's shitty music. Oh my goodness. But yeah, so we did take a trip to Kansas City, which was really cool as a kid. Those were like, but that's those are what our vacations revolved around, and I have some stories I could tell if we want to dive into it.
Yeah, definitely.
But what was traveling as a family like for you when you were growing up?
So I consider myself very lucky. I'm a triplet, and I also have a younger brother.
I still can't.
I don't know if
I've
ever mentioned that.
You've mentioned it to me, but I don't know if it was on air.
So like growing up, we had birthday parties for like the first couple. Like people always have birthday parties on their birthday, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's 3 of us, so that got old very quickly.
Yeah.
As far as planning goes, and I'm sure my parents were like over the top of it as well.
Yeah.
So I think it was 6th grade that we decided, 5th or 6th grade, we decided instead of having a birthday party, we're going to go on a family trip for our birthday.
That's cool though.
We're celebrating 3 of us.
Yeah.
So the first trip was Washington, D.C., and so many good memories from that one. I jumped on a cot and it folded up on me.
Oh, no.
That was a good one. And my brother Pete was scared to get really close to the monument because he was scared of heights and scared of tall buildings.
Yeah, it's funny. He just posted him and Jet Jag were there, and he was like, I used to be scared of the monument.
So that I think was the first one that started it. And then from that year on, every year for our birthday, we would go on like a small birthday trip.
That's cool. That's really cool.
To different places. Not too far. A lot of them ended up being Philly because it was close. And
yeah. Philly's great, though.
And my mom's parents lived in New Jersey, like maybe 10 minutes away from Sandy Hook Beach in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. Been there. Yep.
So we would go there like on weekend trips here and there.
Yeah.
Spread out throughout the summer. And we always went to Wildwood, New Jersey. That was a big like tradition, like family tradition thing where we would meet a little more of our extended family there, and everybody would come the same Labor Day weekend.
Nice.
And that went on consistently for all the way through high school and even into my college years.
Nice.
And then my parents still go there every year around the same time, but not everybody makes it to the same thing. Again, growing through life changes. But no, I was very fortunate that my parents both were able to take us all on trips and were willing to take us a lot of different places. Yeah,
and I think that's a big thing too. That's why I kind of had to put the disclaimer of like, Mom, I don't care that we didn't go to Disneyland. I'm happy that I got to have those experiences I did. See, for us, so I went to Wildwood for the first time in 2020. That summer, my first summer being in a relationship with Kayla, we went to Wildwood together. That was like our first little trip. It was only 2 days, but it was so much fun, man. Like I'm a sucker. So like I like the beach, but I prefer the beach if there's a boardwalk.
Yeah.
So like going to Wildwood was amazing. Like I love boardwalks. But yeah, for my family, our beach trips, we've been to Sandy Hook. We've done Oh man, there was another one I can't recall. I think is Sandy Hook the one that's by the nude beach?
Yeah,
Because I think the one time I was going there with Jack and his mom and my mom and all of our siblings, we took like a day trip to the beach. I think that's the day that the earthquake happened along the East Coast. Because I think we were in the water, and my mom, holy shit, this is a story I forgot about. My mom said his mom and her were sitting on the beach in some chairs, like some beach chairs, and they felt like people were like kicking the back of their chairs, and she was like, who the hell's doing that? And they turned around, and there was like the people that were behind them were like 6 feet behind, and they were like, did you guys feel that too? And they were like, yeah, what was that? And it was when we had the earthquake on the East Coast. And dude, scariest shit ever too. I was in 7th grade at the time. This like military jet flew over. We were in the water, flew over the ocean, super low, like super, super low, really loud. And I think it was them trying to, purely speculation, I'm not a military aviation expert, but like I think it was them checking like maybe to see if there was going to be a tsunami or something, or like checking what level of magnitude it was. I don't know, but yeah, what a weird day that was. But yeah, our big thing as a family wasn't Wildwood. It was usually Atlantic City.
Okay.
My grandparents were and still are big casino people.
Yeah.
And they would always get like free nights. And this is back when the Sands had a hotel and casino down in Atlantic City. They don't anymore, unfortunately, because it moved up to Bethlehem. I think that's why they got rid of it in Atlantic City, because they put one up in Bethlehem, which is now Wind Creek. But yeah, they would always get these free stays, and so we'd go with my grandparents, and sometimes my dad would go, but with his work, like he couldn't always. So it was usually like my mom and I, my grandparents. When my younger sister was born, she would go with us, and that was always such a blast. The boardwalk, and say what you want about Atlantic City, it's ghetto.
It had its heyday.
But like, oh man, I have so many fond memories from that too. Yeah. It's such a great place.
I've gone to Atlantic City a couple different times. When I was much younger, maybe 15 or almost how old am I? I'm almost 30. Jesus.
Oh god. You forgot your own
maybe
age.
Even 20 years ago. I mean, I don't remember exactly when it was, but like a lot more hotels and casinos were active, and it was a little more hopping. Mm-hmm. And then as the time went on, you noticed things were shutting down.
Yeah.
It was becoming a little more not quite as nice as it used to be.
Yeah.
But even now, it's still not a bad place. I can't say now, but even 5 years ago, it's still not a bad place to visit.
Some areas are, it's like anywhere. It's like Philly, it's like Denver, it's like anywhere you go, it has its areas where it's like stay away from there, and then it has its areas where it's like perfectly fine,
Yeah, definitely.
But I remember one time in particular, we went with my grandparents. We drove down. My mom had a Ford station wagon, and the air conditioning broke. I don't know if it broke I think it broke on the drive back. And so we drove back, which Atlantic City, it is only like 2.5 hours, but it's a long 2.5 hours, you know? Oh my God, dude. No air conditioning in like August.
Right.
Oh, it's brutal, which I know you guys did that in the van on a tour. So but that was brutal. That's like the main time I remember. Aside from like, the fun stuff you do on the boardwalk. And I'll touch on it when we get to traveling now, but I did go back to Atlantic City with the guys a couple years ago. But yeah, beach trips, always fun. Like I said, traveled down south. And then I think the big trip I remember from my childhood was going to Kansas City.
Yeah.
I had family. I still have family. We just don't see them as often, who live in Kansas City, Missouri. One of my aunts lives out there. And I was about 9. I think I was going into the 4th grade. I was just getting into wrestling. So it was like, the advent of my interest, it was, when you find something new you love and you get really deep into it. And so like we had basic cable at that point in my life, and my aunt had DirecTV, and there was going to be a WWE pay-per-view on. So she was like, we'll get the pay-per-view, we'll have food, and so that was an awesome experience. We went tubing on like a lake.
Nice.
My Uncle Mike was in the Coast Guard, so he was able to get a boat, and we went tubing. Oh man, that was such a blast. That was one of those things where like afterwards being out in the sun, like it tires you out, but oh man, it's such a great feeling. I went to a Royals game.
Nice.
My dad's a Yankees fan, and the Yankees
was it Yankees Royals?
Yankees Royals. So like that was super fun. We had like the all you can eat section. I remember that being, I was so excited about that, you know, little kid now.
Food
like,
included.
Yo, we can eat whatever we want. You know, it was super cool. You know, that was probably like one of the most fond memories I think I have with my dad, was going to that Royals game. You know, that was like something I'll always remember. And then my cousin, I got to see my cousins who I hadn't seen in, I can't even remember the last time before that I'm actually in a fantasy football league with now. But my cousin James, he grew up watching wrestling, and I remember, you know, like I said, I was just getting into it, and he lives in Kansas City as well, and he came over and he was like, look, man, I'm going to give you my whole collection from my childhood. So he gave me like all of his VHS tapes, his action figures, you know, so, and he watched wrestling with me the one Friday night. So like, it was super cool getting to see that part of the family, and again, go somewhere that's not like here. You know, Missouri's in the middle of the country. It's flat. It's, you know, but again, and I think getting into traveling now, the differences between traveling then and now is like back when you're a kid, you don't plan the itinerary. You don't really pay attention to those almost like culture shock moments. It's more like the
and
fun.
You inadvertently take it for granted. At least I can speak for myself.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
Looking back on it now and thinking, I mean, just sitting here thinking about all the memories that we made and how fortunate I was to be able to travel all over the place. Like I mean, I could go on forever. Literally, I just thought of like 6 more times that we traveled. That was like, I didn't even think of that when we were planning the episode.
Yeah.
But it was just, it's all those experiences. You appreciate it for what it is, definitely, and they were all enjoyable. But looking back on it, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Look how fortunate I was to be able to do all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, of course. But yeah, so do you want to move into traveling now? Is there anything else you want to add? Any stories you want to share?
I mean, so then I count as like taking family trips when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Then through middle school and high school, and towards the end of high school is like when I started doing a little more independent travel as far as I got an opportunity to travel with a concert band over to Europe for, I think it was 2 weeks.
You went to Europe?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I want to say it was 2 weeks in the summer of my sophomore year in high school. So that was like I said, it was not necessarily moving out in the last episode.
Yeah.
But it's the first time I was like independent for a long stretch of time.
Yeah.
Now, granted, my sister also went, so it wasn't like completely independent.
Yeah.
But it was with a group of people that we didn't really know, so it was a cool experience. And I mean, getting to see a different country is just incredible.
Oh yeah.
Like it's hard to describe how different it is, and how 1, eye-opening, 2, enjoyable, 3, just like an unbelievable experience.
That's how I felt when I went west last year for the first time. So I can't even imagine like if and when I ever get overseas. I can't even imagine what that's going to be like.
Yeah. And so then coming into the now, like taking trips with friends in college or going to see friends who went to different schools, like traveling to their school and staying with them. That was stuff that I'll always remember, and they were great times. And that's more of finding your independence and finding your way on your own. You have to plan the trips.
Yep.
You have to
save the money.
Make sure everything's in order. Get yourself there.
Yeah.
Don't get yourself killed while you're there. Don't get yourself arrested. Plenty of things. And then after I graduated, like I mentioned in our previous episode, again, I moved to Nashville.
Yeah.
And that was a whole nother thing. Not necessarily traveling from Nashville, but just traveling to Nashville, living there for a while. I did end up visiting a couple different friends out in that area, like Indiana-ish, and then being in a band, like a lot of the experience, one was to make great music and just enjoy. I mean, the reason I did it was to enjoy playing music with my friends.
Right.
But also being able to tour and see different places was a big reason that I wanted to pursue that as well.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate enough to, make that happen. Like we played, for those of you that don't know, I played in a band called Above the Mendoza, pop punk. Check us out. YouTube, Facebook, Spotify. And
that's how I became friends with you.
Yeah, I mean, so we started
And
local like everybody does.
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough that my brother Pete, who was one of our lead singers, he was at Temple at the time, so we got to play a lot of Philly shows, and I got to be in Philly a lot, and then we made connections with other bands playing those shows, and we were able to book a couple small tours. We got down to North Carolina. We did a 2-week tour down to Florida and back, up to Boston and back. We did 3 weeks down to Texas and back.
Yeah.
I got to play in another band that we drove out to Seattle and met Warped Tour out there, and I had to fly home at that point, but my brother Pete, he got to follow Warped Tour.
Oh, I remember that.
Like all the way back to the East Coast again.
Yeah.
So I mean that was so different than traveling with your family. That's like you're planning everything, you're making sure you know that you have a place to stay. I mean, we had a big van, so we ended up staying in that a lot of times as well, or with like other people that would let us crash after shows. But just, I mean, putting together a tour is a whole thing in itself. But that, as far as traveling, is getting the logistics together, making sure you know when you need to leave to get to places on time.
Yep.
And I just spending that time with like 5 of the coolest dudes I've ever met.
Yeah.
Who I enjoyed playing music with was unbelievably as well. Yeah. And just the people that you meet along the way. I mean, you could say that with music, just going to a concert, you meet cool people, but like all the cool bands that we met and became friends with, and I'm still friends with a lot of people that I met doing that, and all the different things that you see. We generally planned it so that we could spend time in the places that we were going and see different things as well while we were there, also playing shows at night.
Right.
So that's a whole different aspect of it, but you make so many memories, and it's just a different traveling, and I appreciate that as well. Looking back on it, like that was something that not a lot of people either get to do or pursue. Like you always meet the people that want to travel and never actually do it, or want to travel and do it. There's a handful of people that have been all over the world, and I envy them because I think that's awesome, and I strive to be like them. Yeah. But I definitely don't take that for granted, and at times did while I was in the moment, but looking back on it is like, wow. I mean, that was so cool that we got to do that and we're able to pull that off. Yeah.
And it's interesting, one of the points I had about traveling now versus traveling, in your, like, as you're growing up is like, I said, like you've brought up, you have to plan the itinerary, you got to buy the tickets, you got to plan the route, you got to, you can travel whenever you want, you make the plans. But one of the points I had was, it's more freedom. You have more freedom to make the trip what you want it to be. Yep. And it's almost sucky. Like I feel sucky about writing that because you bringing up a good point about like when you're on these trips as a kid, you have these awesome experiences, you take it for granted because like, time flies. Like the older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing time is flying. We're halfway into the year already, at the time of this drop.
Well, yeah.
But
more than half.
But the thing is like, oh shit, yeah, we're in the middle of the summer when this drops. Yeah, but it's like, it's crazy. The older I get, the faster I realize time goes, and the faster experiences go. And I think that's been a big thing I've been I don't want to say struggling with, because I hate to sound like I'm needy or whatever, but like one thing I've definitely struggled with since the start of the year, even since the holidays last year, was like everything just goes so fast, and you like I remember Christmas and New Year's, and like it was our last holidays in Pennsylvania for the foreseeable future, and it's like we tried to make it the best we could. And I remember like New Year's, Kayla and I, it was just the two of us, and like we made our own food, we made snacks, we played Mario Kart and Mario Party and watched Dick Clark. It's like a big thing that I try and do every year, and it's like time just goes so fast. Like before I knew it, the night was over, and like I was getting like, I'm not afraid to admit it, I'm a sensitive person. I was getting all emotional and stuff, and it's like, man, like I value like the holidays and New Year's so much because of that experience. You and I always talk about experiences, right? And the way it makes you feel. And then, as a kid, time went so much slower. Time went so slow.
Felt like it, at least.
Yeah, and you take that for granted because you're like, man, or even like, And now as an adult, like, you get to those experiences where it's like Christmas Day as a kid. It's like, you wake up early, you do the Santa thing, you open all your presents, and, it feels like the day is like forever, and like it's this huge thing, and it's awesome. You see your family, and you have this great experience. You have 2 weeks off from school.
Yep.
And now it's like you're lucky if you get Christmas Eve off. You have Christmas Day off. A lot of people go back to work the day after Christmas. Right. And it's like, by the time you know it, like, you've seen the family, you've exchanged gifts with everyone, dinner's over, and you're back to work, and you're like, man, that, like, it's not even like you tried to slow time down. You tried to, like, soak it up and really take it in. And before you know it, it's like, it's over. Yeah. And it's crazy. The older I get, the more I struggle with that, because it's like, I value those experiences. I hold those times of the year so highly because I know it's such a great time. Yeah. It's crazy. And going back to the whole vacation thing, it's like, you don't realize as a kid, one day, like, this is going to just be a distant memory, you know?
I have to continue to tie it back to mindset. I know in our previous episode, we talked about mindset a little bit. And I know we had an episode, I can't remember what season it was, on positive mental.
That was season 3, episode 5.
Yep.
I remember pulled that one out.
If anyone wants to listen to that,
that's a great one. PMA is the way.
One of my favorites.
One of the best.
But also, like we said, we're talking about when we did it previously versus now, and looking back on it, I've changed my mindset personally, even within the last 10 years. Of like, yes, we inadvertently took for granted everything that we got as a kid, and you don't realize that until you have to do everything on your own. And I may have even taken it for granted experiences I had traveling, like in college and with the band. Yeah. But the older I get, the more I try to stick with my mindset, or force my mindset to be, stop worrying about the little things, start enjoying the experiences, soak everything in for every second that you can, because you never know when it's going to be the same, or like, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So just enjoy everything in the moment. Get out of your phone, be present with the people that you're with, and just really, like, get as much out of it as you can. If you're going somewhere new, see everything that you can, learn about everything that you can, try different foods.
Hell yeah.
Do different activities that they're known for in that area. If it's just with family, enjoy the presence of seeing someone you don't get to see every day. Yeah. And if you see them every day, open up to the fact that, man, I take that for granted too, that I get to see these people every day and spend time with them. Yeah. And just, that's what my mindset's been, and that's what my mindset's going to be moving forward.
Hell yeah. And I think a really good point to tie in, talking about how time as a kid went so slow, and we kind of took those things for granted. Getting into traveling now, as I think I said earlier in the episode, I went through a big change in my life over 3 years ago now, where I came out of a long-term relationship, and I had the freedom to just kind of like rediscover myself. And it's weird because people were saying that to me left and right. They're like, oh, you'll re-find yourself, you'll kind of, and like, I didn't know what that meant at the time. Yeah. But then through traveling, through making new friends, through new experiences, and not to say like extreme culture shocks, but like going to Philly, growing up as a kid in like a generally white suburb in the Lehigh Valley, and going to a school where there's maybe 2 or 3 black students, it's like you go to Philly and it's just a mash of cultures, a mash of different nationalities, and there's so much to see, and it's like so much stimulation going into your body. But it's one of those things where being in that this new part of my life, it's crazy. Time did seem to slow down for a little bit. It was really weird. I don't know if it was a mental thing or not, but I do know, like, going to Philly, I went to Atlantic City with Jack and John that summer, and time just, I remember that day in Atlantic City felt so slow. Yeah. And not in a bad way. It was like an enjoyable, like, it was a very, tying it back to the PMAs the way episode, it was a very mindful experience, you know. I remember the guys ran into a bar to get beer. They wanted to, for the beach or whatever, and they ran in, and I was just kind of like hanging out outside by the car with the cooler, and I remember like looking into the sky, and the sun was really bright, the sky was clear, not a cloud in it, and I just remember thinking like how nice it felt.
Yeah.
I wasn't really thinking about anything. I wasn't thinking about how bummed out I was or what was going on or how sad I felt. It was just like I was just there. I was in the moment, you know? And it's really cool, I think, when you have those experiences like traveling in the now. Is like when you do slow down and you're like, man, this is a really cool, I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm glad I'm with who I'm with.
Definitely.
But yeah, traveling now, I mean, I've gone quite a few places. I think at 19, that was the first vacation I took without my family. And it was weird at first because, you know, I'm so used to like my dad being the driver.
Right.
And, you know, you're all in the car and it's like, okay, we take turns playing CDs. And you know, I went to Vermont in the previous relationship I was in. We went to Vermont and that was an interesting experience because at that point in time, I thought I wanted to move to Vermont because my whole thing, you know, at that point, probably from the time I was like 15, 16 years old, like I don't want to say antisocial, but I wasn't. I'm still an introvert now, but I was not as socially apt as I am now. So I was like, oh, Vermont's the second least populated state. I want to move to Vermont because I don't want to be around people. And I remember, you know, a really good piece of advice. And Mike, if you're listening, thank you for this. Mike gave me this awesome piece of advice of like before I went to Colorado. And even when I went to Vermont, I was sorely disappointed because I'd built it up in my mind like it's going to be this amazing place. It's going to feel like home. I'm going to get there and it's going to be like, this is it. And I remember getting there and it's funny. I touched on it on the episode with Tommy where we talked about our ideas and I brought up when I wanted to move there.
Yeah.
And I got there and I was like, this place sucks. Like it's super political, which I hate.
Yeah.
And you know, everything closed really early. The downtown, and I'm not saying it sucked. Like I had fun. There was a lot of cool stuff downtown to do, but everything closed super early, which is different from here. Cause like at the time, you know, before COVID, 24-hour diners and Walmart's open 24 hours and things are open late. There, like places were closing during the week, 6, 7, 8 o'clock. And then it was like, well, you're stuck in the hotel room. There's not much to do. You know, I went bowling like half the week because, but yeah, so like, I would say that was probably my least favorite vacation solely because like I had fun, but those aspects of like things closed super early. There were nights where I remember the night before I left, I was really hungry and everything had closed. And it was either, well, I walked down the street to Sunoco, the gas station, and get some shitty food, or I just waited out till the morning. You know, it was brutal. But that, you know, so I went to Vermont at 19 and then a year later I went to Maine, Portland, Maine. Maine is
beautiful.
I love Portland, Maine. That's somewhere on the East Coast. Like I could, at that time, I could have seen myself living there because it felt like home. And it was one of those things where I just went into it like it's somewhere new. I don't have any expectation. It just felt like home, but it wasn't at home. It was different enough that, you know, but I think a big piece of advice that Mike gave me was like, don't set any expectations. Just go. Just experience it and let the experience build the judgment in your mind before you even get there. Or don't build the judgment in your mind before you get there. Let the experience do that while you're there. I
also think, and this is an interesting point that, or maybe not, I don't want to set the standards too high that it's interesting, but to tie it back to the comfort level, like you're saying you weren't so comfortable the first time you went out on your own, and obviously that's to be expected. Mm-hmm. But
it's just weird, like not having that safety net of like your family.
And we would probably have to bring on a psychologist or someone to really deep dive into this.
Mark Giuliano, didn't he go to school for psychology?
He might have. Mark, you listening? We need your help.
Shout out to Goalkeeper. Please sponsor me.
So I feel like I've always been very comfortable traveling. Like I mentioned we went to Philly a lot as a family growing up. So when I did my first trip to Philly by myself, as like a college student or with the band, you know, I wasn't necessarily like, oh, this is a culture shock or this is really new. That's one specific example, but just in general, like, I don't know if it's how frequently I went on vacation or we were able to travel or go on trips that made it like a natural comfort, or the fact that booking the tours in the band and like really wanting to get out on my own and travel as a band just kind of bridge the gap of comfort in traveling. Yeah. You know, I can't pinpoint one example, but it's funny to see the contrast of, like, I don't know, I just feel like I've always been very comfortable doing it. And you're saying these new places you weren't necessarily the most comfortable the first time you went.
Right. And I think it's one of those things where the more I did it as an adult, like Vermont in 2017 was like, it was weird because, again, there wasn't like that safety net. I wasn't used to it just being like me. And
that one's also a special case because it literally was just you going to Vermont, right?
No, the first time I went was with someone else.
Okay.
But so like that was weird. But then like Maine, I was like, okay, I've done this before. It's a longer drive, but I know what to expect in terms of like,
Right.
But yeah, and also, have you ever ridden a train? Taken a train ride somewhere? That was another trip. End of 2017 when my sister and Sean, when they moved back up here from the south, Sean and I moved their house, and so it was one of those things where we took a train down and then packed up a Penske truck, and this one's for you, Sean, if you're listening. Penske. That's an inside joke. Penske truck. But yeah, no, and so like we took an Amtrak from Trenton down to Raleigh, North Carolina. Oh man, that was so much fun. If I can give a piece of advice to anyone who's looking to travel within a reasonable distance, it's an 8-hour drive or an 8-hour train ride. It's the fun aspect of traveling without the stress of driving. We missed our train the first time, which that's a whole other story for a whole other day. But we just got on the train. We made a peanut butter sandwich on a whole loaf of bread. I took like half of that with, we just got to eat and hang out and talk about music. And I remember we went back to the dining car and got coffee, super fun experience. It was probably the least stressed I've ever been traveling. It's just, you get on a train and you just let them take you, and it was awesome. And you get to see parts of the country too, just out the window. I'm
going to backtrack on my previous statement about needing a psychologist. I just pinpointed where the comfort level was. Mm-hmm. And this is going to tie back into our previous episode that we did to kick off the season of Big Life Changes.
Yeah.
It was going to college because I had to learn how to use transportation, like taking the bus and the train to come home on my own. So that kind of thrusts me into getting more comfortable in those situations, and I would positively state that that's what aided in the comfort level.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bus, taking the bus trips places, taking the train trips places, not always a great time. I could go on with a bunch of stories. The bus, I was on like a 6-hour bus ride one time the day before Thanksgiving because it's the most traveled day of the year. You just sit on the bus for hours in traffic.
That's one thing I said to Kayla. I was like, because our goal is to get home for either Thanksgiving or Christmas every year.
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, babe, we're going to have to fly in like a week or two before and leave the week after.
Right.
Because that travel time is nuts. And it's expensive too.
Yeah. I just wanted to tie back to that point and say because you mentioned the train and that made it click.
Yeah. But so like the whole like traveling now thing, like I said, I went to Atlantic City with the boys that I was hanging out with at the time, and I also went to Philly with John. I remember like I had been wanting to go to Philly. Jack and I ended up there by accident. I totally forgot about this. If you want to listen to the was it the Lost Road Sign Treasure Parks episode from 2 years ago? Jack and I used to go on these long drives just aimlessly. We had no destination. And the one time we ended up on South Street in Philly. And ever since then, I had wanted to go back, and I just never had the time, or I never made the time, I should say.
Right.
And I never planned it. But once I was in this new stage of my life, I was like, yo, John, let's go to Philly. Let's go to the Lincoln Financial Field. It's the middle. We went like the day before the 4th of July, and we walked around South and Broad. And
nice.
Oh, dude, it was such a blast. And that combined with a couple weeks later, we went to Atlantic City all together. And like I said, those trips came at a time when I really needed them. I was going through a lot mentally, and like it was a really good distraction, but it was also a really good like learning experience. I remember being in Philly and realizing like, you know what, like life's gonna go on, and like there's so many people out there to meet and make friends with and date or whatever, and it's like there's so much opportunity out there. I got to stop living in this box of like, this was my life.
Sure.
What can my life be now? So like that experience with Atlantic City and Philly, really came at a good time. And then the second time I went to Vermont, I've touched on it a couple times, was later that summer. I was really doing a lot better, or it was in the fall, I should say. I was doing a lot better at this point mentally, and I went up, and it was an Airbnb. It was a little tiny house on top of a mountain, no cell service, and I just took all my music stuff and I recorded I recorded an album. Shout out Union Coffee Break, Perfect Love. That was the last release ever for Union Coffee Break. But yeah, that was a total blast too. And it was really good. Just a really good experience. It was my first time. That was my first time ever going anywhere alone, just me. And it really opened my eyes up to I was I can do this. I don't need anyone else in my life. I'm content being on my own at that point in time. I was it was a really good exercise for me to, again, get out of that comfort zone and kind of refine myself. Yeah. Super cool.
I just want to do one last point on traveling now, because now I'm married. I have a wife. I have a stepdaughter. So that kind of put a new perspective on traveling as well. For the last couple of years, we take 1 or 2 big trips. We've done Virginia Beach. We did Myrtle Beach. But it puts a different perspective from being the child traveling to now traveling with a child. It's just fun. I mean, it's fun. I enjoy it a lot. But it's that full circle experience.
Yeah. The full circle.
The full circle experience. That's just how I talk.
No, I was referencing the episode from last season. Yeah. Full circle. Shout out Nick Foles. Please sponsor me. Please come back to the Eagles. God.
But yeah, now let's dive into favorite and least favorite.
All right.
So you touched on least favorite.
Yeah,
and favorite.
Okay. So again, I don't want to say least favorite because I don't want to sound overly negative. I just think the time period in my life where I was at, maybe mentally and romantically, not the best time of my life. And also, just like I said, it wasn't what I expected because I built it up in my mind as this grand, and then, being oh, we got to go do everything we want to do by 6 p.m. because downtown closes at whatever. Or I remember the 2 doors down from the motel we stayed in, there was a bowling alley. And so it ended up just being well, I guess I'll just go bowling every night.
Because they were a bowling trip.
They were open till 9.
Yeah.
Ooh.
The latest place in town.
No, seriously, it was. It was the Walmart there closed at 8. Well, see, the thing is so I stayed in Brattleboro, Vermont, because I wanted to move to Marlboro. Driving through Marlboro, holy shit, it's a shithole. But, sorry. But Brattleboro is it's comparable to a Doylestown, a very hip little downtown area. There was no Walmart near the closest Walmart. I had to go across the border into New Hampshire.
Oh wow!
To get to. It wasn't a super far drive, but the Walmart closed at 8.
Yeah.
So it was but yeah, so it turned into a bowling trip basically, and it was well, I guess I'll just go bowling. And there was an arcade, so I played a lot of DDR. Nice. I'm not into the rhythm games, but again, those are fun memories I have. Bowling is awesome. I love bowling. I don't do it enough, but but I would just say overall, that's probably my least favorite trip I've ever been on because I've had so many that were so much better since.
Again, I think, and we talked about this before we started recording, I'm sure if I thought hard enough, I could definitely pick out a trip that was oh, everything went wrong, and it rained every day when we went to the beach, but I don't know. When, like I said, when we were talking about mindset, I take something, looking back on it, I take something from every experience that I've had as far as a fond memory or some kind of positive that I can get out of it.
Yeah.
So I don't have a least favorite vacation to list for you. I'm sure I could think of one, but I'm not going to even take the time to do it. Nah,
but let's stay on the positive side. Let's talk about favorite trips we've ever taken. I'll let you start us off. I just talked a lot.
Oh man, I could name a million different instances. I'm only going to keep it to probably 2 or 3 very short ones. I graduated high school, and my brother and my dad and myself are very into sports.
Yeah.
And we've always discussed a baseball road trip. I've always personally wanted to see all 32 stadiums.
Right.
And we had kind of dabbled with plans to see what we could come up with, and we never really had anything solid. But for my high school graduation trip, my dad and I planned a baseball road trip where we went. It wasn't every stadium, but I think we hit 6 stadiums in 7 days. We drove
cool.
from here out to Chicago.
Oh, so you saw Wrigley.
So,
that's great.
Oh, and there were so many good stories. If anyone wants to share stories, I love sharing stories. I would love to hear your stories.
Hell yeah.
I have a million from that trip in particular.
So what fields list off what fields did you see?
So we did Pittsburgh.
Okay.
We did Cleveland.
Okay.
We did both Chicago's, White Sox and Cubs.
Okay, so it's Wrigley, and is it Comerica Park? Is that White Sox?
I think it's called U.S. Cellular Field now. They change names so often.
There's Comerica the Tigers.
Comerica's the Tigers, I believe. And we did Milwaukee, which is just north of Chicago.
Okay.
About an hour and a half north.
Okay.
So that was 5 stadiums, and we stopped at Notre Dame on the way out in South Bend, Indiana.
Okay.
So I count that as 6 because it's like the big football stadium. We got on the basketball court there.
Nice.
Shout out to the person who left the door open to the arena. So yeah, I mean that was an incredible trip, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was just a whole week of just the two of us eating great food, seeing great baseball, walking around towns. He drove the whole way, which was awesome.
Shout out to Aaron's dad.
Yeah, shout out to my dad and my whole family. The second one I want to touch on, so that was 2010. I graduated high school, went on this awesome week-long road trip, seeing a bunch of baseball. Tying into the baseball thing, I want to say it was 2011, but it may have been 2012. Spring break, we planned a trip to spring training. It was myself, my sister, my dad, and my dad's parents. And they drove down from Lehigh Valley, picked me up in Washington, D.C. at school, and we drove to Florida, which was awesome.
Oh, man.
I think we stopped in South Carolina and then drove the second half down to Clearwater, Florida.
So, and that's where the Phillies practice, right? Because I know spring training, I'm not too big into baseball like I used to be as a kid. Spring training is either in Florida or in Arizona, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So a lot of the teams go to, like half the teams go to Florida, half the teams go to Arizona.
I would assume it's probably just like where you're at in the country, whatever's
I believe
closest.
So.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we went down to see the Phillies essentially. Yeah. I think we saw the Phillies and we saw the Yankees stadium while we were down there.
Okay.
So I think we saw 3 or 4 games. It's fun to be down there, but also you're like in Florida. It's beautiful beach weather. We had a hotel right on the Clearwater Beach, which is awesome.
Yeah. And
again, you just soak up all that, being in a different place, and enjoy with who the people you're with. Keep it short, that was awesome as well. It was a good experience with my grandparents as well.
Did you get to meet any of I know at spring training or even like with football, like at training camp, a lot of times the players will come up and like sign things.
Yeah, I got a ball. I don't know if it was signed or not. I think I came away with 2 foul balls or something.
Okay. Were you ball hawking? Was it on purpose?
It was a foul ball. It
just kind of like came to you.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So you weren't being like Zach Hampel. You ever hear that guy?
No.
Oh my God, he's this guy on YouTube. Not to change the subject to deviate too far. I mean, who really cares? But that's what this is all about. But no, he's this guy on YouTube. He's like famous, not just on YouTube, but he's been doing this since like the 90s. He literally goes to baseball games and will like go out of his way to get foul balls. Like he'll run all over the stadium to get foul balls, home runs. He'll like over kids. And I mean, like he does
to get the famous moments or what?
I don't know. I mean, he had this like long running streak of like over 1,000 games or something like that, where he had at least 1 ball, or he'd get like a toss up from a player or something. Oh man, like
interesting.
I love watching the videos during baseball season because like they're interesting,
right?
But at the same time, the guy kind of gives me douchebag vibes.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but either way, so you got a couple foul balls. Did you meet any of the players at all?
I think we got to shake some hands. You get pretty close. It's much more relaxed than like a regular season game where there's a lot of security. You can't get too close to the field all the time.
Yeah.
There's much less people coming to the games. There's smaller stadiums that they play in, so it's just the nature of it that you're a little bit more interactive with the players.
Right.
That was second great trip, and the last one I'll list is my honeymoon. Like I mentioned in our previous episode, Big Life Changes, started the season. Go back and check it out because there's also great stories in there. my honeymoon was canceled twice. It was supposed to be a cruise, then it was supposed to be an all-inclusive resort, and we ended up doing a road trip in the Northeast because a lot of things were shut down at the time, were very strict. The Northeast was still open, but they were being cautious. Like, you had to wear masks all over the place. So we knew it was going to be different, but at least we could do something.
Yeah.
So we planned this road trip out. We hit Rhode Island, Massachusetts. Then we drove up to Maine, spent a couple days in Maine. Then we did Vermont, and then ended at Niagara Falls in New York.
That's awesome.
And just so many really cool experiences. We did so Rhode Island has a lot of cool like mansions on the waterfront. We ate at a really, really good pub called Muse. I think it was called Muse Pub.
Okay.
In Rhode Island. We stayed in Providence overnight. Then we traveled to Boston. We saw Boston during the morning. Then we drove to Salem, where we stayed for a couple days in Salem, right around Halloween time too. And there wasn't as many people because of the pandemic.
Yeah, they
were like very limited, but that's an awesome place and very big around Halloween time. Obviously,
of course,
Salem witch trials. Then we went up to Maine and we stayed in an Airbnb right on the ocean front, or like the ocean side.
Have you seen you've seen the Rocky Coast?
Yeah.
So cool, dude. So I love that.
And the lighthouses are awesome. That's something I never really was into, but just seeing those is very cool.
Yeah. When I was in Maine, I went to the Headlight. That's like, I think the big one. Oh, super cool experience.
And we went to the Acadia National Park and hiked around the park one day. And then we went to Vermont and did a bunch of breweries because there's not a lot to do in Vermont. Stayed at a really sketchy Airbnb.
Nice.
Left at 4 a.m. because we didn't feel comfortable staying in the Airbnb.
Wait, why was it sketchy?
It wasn't so much sketchy. It was just not that nice, and like the neighbors were literally like conjoining walls, and they were really loud and like stomping up and down the stairs.
Okay.
Very loud bathroom fan connected to the light, so you turn on the light and it's like an airplane starting up while you're trying to go to the bathroom. Good stuff. And then that was a fun ride because it's very dark. Not a lot of street lights or anything in between Vermont and New York. And it's like 7 hours from I think we were in Burlington, Vermont to the Niagara Falls.
Okay.
So we're riding through is it the Adirondack? Not Adirondack, that's a chair. There's some kind of mountain range.
It starts with an A. I know exactly what you're talking about,
and it was cool because you could see the sun rising, but we also were creeped out when it was dark because there was a car following us at one point. This guy could be a murderer, you know?
Yeah, those thoughts go through your head,
So many good memories. I love my wife. We got not so much closer, but it just brought us that much closer to spend that time. We both enjoy traveling. Something I wouldn't trade for the world, and we had a tremendous time at every place that we went.
Hell yeah!
Even if we had to leave at 4 a.m. because it was a sketchy Airbnb.
Did you do a lobster roll?
No, we both don't really like seafood at all. So
I'm not a seafood person either. But when I was in Maine, everyone was like, "You got to try the lobster.
Yeah,
you got to get
Maine lobster."
And so I was like, "All right, I'll try a lobster roll." I hate mayonnaise. I didn't know that they put it in mayonnaise, but there was an option to do just lemon and butter. So that's what I did. And I was like, I was expecting it to be warm. And it was cold. It comes cold. It's safe to eat, but I was not expecting it to be chilled.
Right.
And it was good. It didn't have that real fishy taste I was expecting. But again, I was it was good, but I don't know what the hype is over it. And of course, people were like, "You didn't get the right kind. You didn't go to the right place." But I was like, "Guys, it's in Maine. I got."
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's Maine lobster.
Maine is awesome, dude. I loved Maine as a state.
Oh yeah,
Portland was super cool, you know.
So that was my 3 favorite highlights. But again, there's so many that I can't even. We would be on here for literally days talking about vacations and traveling.
Yeah.
So why don't you wrap it up with your favorite?
So I'll wrap it up. I've talked about it on 2 other episodes at this point. It's the whole reason why I'm moving west. Over this summer is I went to Colorado with my fiance Kayla, and it's just, man, I had heard people say about how different the Western United States is, or the Midwest is compared to the East Coast. Growing up on the East Coast, we're very fast paced, get the hell out of my way, kick ass and take names, just keep, and that's great. And I think growing up here, you know, that'll always be a part of me. But it's one of those things where it's just like, you know, like I had said, I traveled a lot before COVID. COVID kind of shut it down, and I went to Kayla and was like, look, I want to go somewhere. I feel boxed in. Like, I got to get out of here for a little bit. And she was the one who brought it to my attention. Because I said either Colorado or Texas. And she was like, let's go to Colorado Springs. And she was the one who brought up first about like rent and stuff. She was like, oh, I looked at the rent prices. And I was like, oh shit, you're already jumping to move in there. Like, wow, okay. But yeah, no. So we went, and for those who have never heard, check out the Mile High episode. We talked all about our trip in depth, you know, all the experiences we had and the things we liked, the things... I don't know if there's anything we really didn't like. And I think with Colorado, like we went to Denver, we went to a Rockies game. We flew. That was the first time I've flown since I went to Missouri as a kid. Yeah. So like flying, again, another experience of like I had to navigate the airport by myself. Right. I was leading the charge. It's weird feeling like, you know, we're in it as a team. But I was the one who, like, I bought the plane tickets. Yeah. I was like, all right, Kayla.
I got to take care of this.
I'm going to get us on the plane, and we're going to get there. You know, I'm going to drive us from Denver to Colorado Springs at 2 a.m. when we're both sick. You know, what a wild experience that was. We both got sick right before we went. No, we didn't have COVID. Don't worry, guys. She got tested. It was fine. But it was one of those wild experiences where it's like, man, because we're like, why did we get sick right before? Why?
And that just adds to the stress of the whole situation.
But it's cool because, you know, she questioned, you know, not too long ago, like, why did we get sick? Like, what? And I was like, Kayla, like, I think there's a couple good things came out of that. A, we didn't have the stress of going to work every day, so we had the time to just rest and like sleep in. Or I mean, I didn't really sleep much because I couldn't breathe, but. No, it was like one of those things. A, we had the time to just step back and like, okay, let's chill. Let's not go to work. And two, it just adds to the story that we can tell everyone like, oh man, we were going west for the first time. We were riding on a plane and we got sick 2 days before we left. And
did it ever come up that the stress might have caused you to get sick?
Possibly, because we were both starting new jobs, and it was like one of those things where, yeah, I mean, I know when I'm really stressed, I tend to get sick. But yeah, it could have very well been. But it was a wild experience. I was on a plane. You know, we took a plane out, went to a Rockies game in Denver, got Voodoo Donuts. Yep. Shout out to Voodoo Donuts. That's somewhere I'd been wanting to go since I was like a kid. It was on Man vs. Food, and I saw it at like 9-10 years old, and I was like, I gotta go. The original one's in Portland, Oregon, I think, but they have one in Denver. So after the Rockies game, I was like, babe, we should go get donuts. You know, so like we did that. But the bulk of our trip was spent in Colorado Springs. Oh man, we went to Manitou. I think it's Manitou. I heard someone pronounce it on YouTube. Manitou Springs is like maybe 10-15 minutes away from Colorado Springs. Yeah. There are these cliff dwellings. We went. There's like Native American cliff dwellings. Paid $25 to get in. Turns out they're replicas. They're fake.
There you go. That was your least favorite part.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Tourist trap. But if you want to see the real ones, go to Mason National Park. That's where the real ones are. They just don't want people going there because they don't want them tarnishing them, and they're trying to preserve them. Yeah. So don't go to the cliff dwellings in Manitou Springs. Save the $12.50 per person, and go to Mason National Park.
But don't ruin the.
No. Look, but don't
ruin
touch.
It for everybody.
Look, but don't touch. Yeah, but so we did that. We did First Friday. You know, Kayla being an artist, Colorado Springs has a huge First Friday. So we walked all downtown. We got some really good food. We both bought some art, you know. So like that was a really fun experience. The downtown is super cool. We're foodies. Kayla loves to cook. I love to bake. I love eating. We both love to eat. So like our big thing was like, where are we going to eat? Right. What food are we going to get? You know? So we ate a lot of really good food. And the cool thing is, and we mentioned it on the episode, is like everything out there is spicier. Because it's closer to Mexico. It's closer to, you know, Southern California. Right. It's got that Tex-Mex kind of thing. Love it. Super cool. Lots of flavor. But yeah, so we ate a lot of good food. We drove up Pikes Peak. That's how we ended our trip. Our last day there was like, you know, it was scary because we're driving a rental car. So at the time they were working on the parking lot at the top, which so you would drive up, I think, to mile 10 or 11, and then you would park and get out, and a bus would take you the rest of the way. Now the parking lot's finished, so if you want to drive your car up to the top, you can do that. But oh man, driving a rental car up Pikes Peak, holy shit, really scary. And it's an experience. You know, I got us up, and oh man, what a wild ride that was.
Up and down.
Up and down, yeah. So the whole thing is like I didn't know how to put the car into a low gear. So coming down, I'm just like pumping the brakes, and like not like pump, pump, pump. Like the way the bus driver said to do it, he's like stab the brakes, like go a little bit, stab it, go off. You know, just kind of roll. And once you get down to a certain point, they have like a park ranger, like a state conservation officer, and they will heat check your brakes. They'll take the temperature, and if they're too hot, they make you pull over because you will literally melt your brakes, and then your brakes will fail. So we got down to the checkpoint on the way down, and she was like, you know, your brakes are a little hot. And I was like, she said, are you in a low gear? I said, no, I honestly don't know how to put the car in a low gear. She goes, well, thank you for saying that. I'll show you how. So like, it was cool. You know, it was a learning experience.
Yeah.
But we stopped off anyways. We took some really nice pictures. You know, there was some nice, you know, scenery, and the top of Pikes Peak is wild too. You know, luckily we didn't really experience elevation sickness at all while we were in Colorado. That's a big thing people deal with when they're not like, and I was expecting, cause we're from a valley, to have that issue, but like I was fine the whole time, no matter where we went. I mean, on top of Pikes Peak, it's like 14,115 feet tall or something like that. You do feel, it's a weird feeling. I felt like Jello, like getting up that high. You're like, oh shit. I was like, oh man, but like I didn't feel sick or anything. We got their like famous, I'm doing air quotes, their famous donuts, you know, that they make up there. They have to make them differently because of the elevation. Yeah. It was an awesome experience. I couldn't think of a better way to cap off the trip. But yeah, we did a lot. We did a lot while we were there. And it just ended up, you know, it felt right. Like it felt like we belonged. And it's the first vacation I've ever been on where I went somewhere and I felt like I fit in. I was like, oh man, like I feel like I was meant to be here. And another thing that I've told people, and people, you know, like family, and they're like, really? Like I said, it's the first vacation I've ever taken where I like didn't want to leave. I've never gone on, like every time I've gone on a vacation, whether it was a family vacation as a kid or one of these trips to Vermont or Maine, you know, I'd have fun while I was there. But then at the end of the trip, I was like, all right, I had my fun. I'm ready to go home now. I'm ready to go back to my friends. I'm ready to go back to whatever. This was like the morning we left. So our flight out. So we flew into Denver from Philly, and we flew out of Denver back to Philly. And from Colorado Springs, it's an hour drive, especially in the middle of the night. There's no traffic. And it was bizarre, too, because like you were talking about there being areas with no street lights. That's how it was. It's flat. It's desert in some areas, and it's just no street lights. But the highways are empty, so you can just blow down the road. Speed limit's like 75. You know, you just fly down the road. I was driving a 2021 Hyundai something or other, you know, so... You know, it was an easy drive, but the morning we left, we had to get up at 2 to leave at 3. Our plane boarded at like 6, I think. So like we had to get up really early. And I remember like, you know, we're sitting there, it's like 2 a.m. I'm like, Kayla, I don't want to leave. Like, I don't want to go back home. I want to stay here. And like in the airport, you were talking about the sunrise when you were in New York. Dude, sitting in the Denver airport watching the sunrise over like the flat, like arid, kind of deserty looking, what an experience that was. Like it was almost like in Star Wars, like Tatooine, like the desert planet, like how they have like the big red moon or whatever. That's like what the sun was, just this huge red orb. I will never forget watching the sunrise. It was absolutely incredible. But I just remember sitting in the airport and I was like, babe, I don't want to go home. Like this is where I want to be. And at that point, she decided, like, yeah, like, we should move out here, you know, because she was like, I could totally see us being here. Like, this feels right. And it was just one of those experiences, man, where, like, that was the only trip I've ever taken where I just never I didn't want to come home. I was like, I just wish I could stay here. I literally told her, I'll go get a job today. I don't care. You can bring my stuff. We can bring our stuff back out another day. Like, I'll stay here. Right. And, you know, obviously we came home. But, yeah, it was a life-changing experience, I think, going out west, and that's what led to my move. Hopefully it's taking place before this drops. But yeah, no, that was like my favorite vacation by far I've ever been on. We had a blast. It was just fun and laughs the whole time. It's a great story, great experience. Again, go check out the Mile High episode. There was never a dull moment, and there was never a moment where I was like, this sucks. Right. So that's why I love it so much. It was great. Absolutely awesome.
Hell yeah, man. But
really good episode today, man. This has been a blast. Traveling is important, and I highly encourage those listening, if you don't travel, do it more. If it's within your means.
Right.
I mean, money is only money. That's another piece of advice Mike gave me. Money's only money, but seriously, like, while you can, get out, travel, experience the world. You won't regret it. That's my closing remark.
Yeah.
You have anything else you want to add?
No, I think we covered a lot.
Hell yeah. Well, in that case, thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you either had a laugh, maybe learned something. I feel like Aaron and I are always like dropping knowledge in these episodes.
Trying to.
But yeah, seriously, huge thank you to everyone listening. Check us out on social media. Leave a comment. Follow on SoundCloud, Facebook.
Share your stories with us.
Share your stories with us on Facebook and Instagram, or leave a comment here on SoundCloud. We would love to talk about this more with you guys. Sign up for our email newsletter and buy some merch.
Yeah. And with that, drink it while it's hot.
Tune back in 2 weeks. We got Donut Wars with Kayla. And now,
drink it while it's hot.
Yeah.